Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? Yeah, that pause right there was for me to wait for you to guess, but you can probably guess. News, rumors, updates, and leaks. That's what we have today. And these ones are very exciting, right? We also have a little bit of insight into the Switch 2 and how it's performing and things we could expect in the future. And yeah, it's all very exciting stuff. So let's go ahead and get right into this video. That's right, it is a new week, and with that comes updates, rumors, leaks, news, stuff that happened over the weekend, new stuff that happened as well. And this video is kind of all over the place, but I mean that like the best way possible. I'm sure there's other news channels out there, or Switch 2 or Nintendo YouTubers who like kind of have a little bit more of a cohesive video. That's not my style, so yeah, we're kind of all over the place today, but very exciting stuff on my notes right here. So before we get started, before we actually get started, I just want to say thank you so much for 28,000 subscribers. It truly means the world to me. Now 30,000 is right around the corner. So before we get started, if you could hit a like and subscribe, obviously that would mean the world to me. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter so we can keep these communities growing. Let's go and get right into this one. So some of the biggest news to happen over the past few days is there is a new Switch 2 console coming out. And this isn't a rumor. And this news, I mean, at least in my opinion, I think it's actually pretty crazy. And I'm curious if we could do a couple of things. But the news is, due to Europe's right to repair law, I believe, Nintendo has to make a new Nintendo Switch 2 model that the battery can be repaired and like taken out by the user, I guess, which is very interesting. And I know that there's like some right to repair stuff here in America too, but I don't think it's like as big of a deal as it is over there. So this is awesome because I think everybody should have the right to fix their own products, right? That's what makes it your product. I think there's other stuff they have to do as well, but I know the battery is the big thing. So yeah, I'm reading on the notes right here. Even the Joycon 2s will be easier to repair, which is, again, very interesting. So this new requirement does not go into effect until February of 2027. So that new model can come out, anytime from now until then. But if I had to guess, that's something they're probably going to start working on right away. So here's one of the questions I'm having. Since I don't think the Switch 2 is region locked, like, I could buy this new model from Europe and then use it over here. And like I said, I don't see this being a problem. So I could see there being a market for European Switch 2s over like the regular ones, right? It's like, you spend a little bit more on shipping, but then you can repair Switch 2 at any time. That's probably worth an extra $50, at least in my opinion. So then it has me asking another question. Does it make sense for Nintendo just to mass manufacture these moving forward? Like, this is going to be the only Switch 2 or the base Switch 2 moving forward, at least by February of next year. So very interesting to see how this all plays out. And then quickly, before we get into some other bigger updates, in that recent firmware update, every time this happens, Nintendo goes in and fixes like compatibility issues with the Switch 2 on Switch 1 games. And there's a new list of 10 games. And these games are like games you're actually going to want to play this time. So the list is A Hat in Time, which is a phenomenal platformer, Botany Manor, Dadish, Darius Burst, SC Core, Doom 2016, Ernest Evans Collection, Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and Limbo. So I guess there was some issues maybe with like saving the games or just whatever reason. But then I've seen other people saying that they've been playing Doom 2016 on their Switch 2 non-stop and they've had no issues. Whatever the reason, at least Nintendo is going in and fixing these games, because you have to remember, at the time of the Switch 2's release, there was over 12,000 Switch 1 games. That's an insane amount of games to have to go in and test and then fix or do whatever they have to do. I don't know, it's probably magic. But this is good, right? Because we have this, and then we have the boost mode now. A lot of Switch games, man, definitely worth revisiting on the Switch 2. Now with that big Switch 2 firmware update, right? It gave us boost mode. It fixed some Switch 1 games. Another thing that was fixed that I didn't realize is GameCube. Like, the GameCube app was fixed. There was like a big overhaul, like sensitivity and sound and visuals and a bunch of other stuff, right? That is cool. But other stuff happened as well that was mentioned nowhere. But technically, this is not a good thing. And what happened is, if you remember 4 or 5 days ago, right, we finally seen some of the first fake Switch 2 Joy-Cons. And they look 100% legit. They're half the price at $45. The only caveat is there is no mouse mode sensor, right? And if you're like me, you're not even using mouse mode. But I was talking to one of my subscribers on Instagram, a place you should be following me, and they actually bought the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, right? And we were having a conversation about these fake Switch 2 Joy-Cons, and I was like, hey, send me the link to where you got them. I want to buy some. The problem is I only check my messages every few days because I'm so busy. So they messaged me, we had a conversation about them, and I said, send me the link. Then the Switch 2 firmware update happened, and then a day later, I checked my messages. They sent me the link, and then they sent me another message on top of that saying, do not order these anymore. Because since that last Switch 2 firmware update, they no longer work at all. So I think Nintendo seen that these were going around and killed them working with the Switch 2 at all, right? I'm sure there's going to be more that will come out that will work again, but it's very interesting that we've seen these start hitting the market and people start getting them last week or the last few weeks, and then we got that big firmware update that killed them immediately, and it's just very funny. These companies probably spend a lot of money making these and they don't even work anymore, so I'm sure they're going to go in there and fix some stuff, but like me, I was interested in them and I can't even use them, so I'm glad that I was so late to check my messages because I did not buy them. And then before we get into some more official news and a really big leak, I want to talk about this concept that I've seen on Reddit. And what it is for a Switch 2 dual screen, right? And if you remember, maybe before the Switch 2 came out, there was all these mock-ups of what a DS or dual screen Switch 2 could look like. And every time we would see it, the Switch 2 would be like this, and then there would be a screen attachment on top, which just sounds so crazy when you think how heavy this is, and then a whole second screen, and then you factor in, I guess, the battery. It's probably not the best idea, but if that did happen, it's something we would all probably buy, myself included. So there's a person over on Reddit who made a new concept of a Switch 2 dual screen controller. A lot of people in the comments are like, no way it would happen. This is dumb, whatever. Me personally, I think there is something that could be there. So shout out to LukePS7013 over on Reddit. On the screen, I'll be showing you this concept right now. And I just gotta say, out of all these dual screen Switch 2 mock-up things, this one makes the most sense because you're only adding the Switch 2 screen here. Obviously, I don't know what goes into making all these like accessories for a Switch 2, and I don't know how any of this stuff would work, right? I'm a simpleton. I'm a peasant from the countryside of an English village in 1400s, right? You guys remember Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder? So that's my understanding of this, right? Simple Jack's understanding. All I'm saying is it's a very interesting concept and one that makes you stop and think, interesting. So now I want to talk about some official Nintendo Switch 2 numbers, because while the Switch 2 is breaking a ton of records, right? It's selling incredibly well. I'm starting to see them a lot more like while I'm traveling and just in the wild. Normally you would see Switches. I'm starting to see a lot more Switch 2s, which makes sense. There's probably, like 18 or 19 million sold at this point. It's still kind of hard to put it in perspective with the first year of the Switch. We can do it numbers wise, but then you have to like factor in other stuff. And maybe the Switch did better at some times than the Switch 2 did. Maybe the Switch 2 is doing better in the long run. Maybe it's not. So I have an official graph here, and it's interesting because you can tell when it peaked and tell where the Switch is doing better, and we can kind of figure out the reasons why, if we're being honest. So this is a graph of the Switch versus Switch 2 first year of sales. And when we see it start off, yeah, the Switch 2 is doing better, right? Right out of the gate, the Switch 2 is doing better. And then we see a huge spike, which would be around the holidays. But after that spike, we're starting to see it die down a little bit. And then comparing that to the Switches line, where it's starting to rise up a bit, it's interesting. And then if you ask yourself the question, why is this happening? Why does it seem like, I don't want to say it's dying down, but you could see it's not maybe rising as fast as it was at one point. And to put it simply, at least in my opinion, I honestly think it's because we don't have any huge first-party system sellers. Now, don't get me wrong. I know Pokemon Pokopia really took people by surprise and is actually becoming a system seller. You're seeing people all the time saying, I bought the hype. I bought a Switch 2 for this. That's fantastic. We have that. So in April, what is going to make you go out and buy a Switch 2? We have Tamagotchi Life, but that's technically a Switch game. Okay. Then in May, we have Yoshi. And while I do think Yoshi looks very interesting and I'm very excited to play it, I don't think anybody's going out and buying a Nintendo Switch 2 so they can play a new Yoshi game. Okay. Now, we don't know what's happening in June, and I would hope sometime between now and June we get a new Nintendo Direct. I know a lot of times in June we do get one, but I just think we honestly have to have one way before that sets up the summertime. There's no real reason to go out and buy a Nintendo Switch 2 unless you just want to buy one, and that's fine. But you can see this. This is on this graph right here. You can see it kind of being stagnant a little bit. And that's because when you compare it to the first year of the Switch, yeah, it started off a little slow because people were unsure coming from the Wii U. But once it started to get traction, and then you're getting all these huge first-party games, and then after the holidays, people were like, okay, we understand what's going on. After that, it exploded in popularity. So I just find this graph pretty interesting because it kind of lays out just the facts, you know what I mean? And sometimes the facts are the hardest to digest because they're true. And now we have a pretty big leak. Some people are thinking one thing, which is cool, but then some other people are thinking something else, which is a lot cooler. And that is a huge PS5 game, like an exclusive game, or at least it might be on PC and PS5. I don't think it's on Xbox, but it could be, whatever, coming over to the Switch 2. According to the LinkedIn page of Carlos Aguilar, Senior Director of 505 Games, Bloodstained: The Scarlet Engagement will be released for Nintendo Switch. 505 Games also has an unannounced game coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, and some people are thinking that Switch 2 game could possibly be another Bloodstained game, or maybe a Switch 2 edition of a Bloodstained game. But then I read the comments and did a little bit more research, and what it seems like it's actually going to be is a Death Stranding port for the Nintendo Switch 2. And I guess there has been some rumors for a little bit now that there is a Death Stranding port being worked on for the Switch 2. And I'll be honest, it's a game at first I had no interest in, but I've actually watched like some deep dives on the gameplay. And it's Kojima, so you know, there's probably going to be something for me to enjoy there. It's one of those games like, yeah, I could play on my PS5, but it's kind of a game that I feel like I need to take my time with. And the Switch 2 is great because you can pick it up and play for 10 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. So regardless if it's a game that I will buy or not, I think Death Stranding would just be a huge game to come over to the Switch 2. Graphically, it's so impressive, and I think it would just be another huge game to showcase like the power and performance, graphics, all that of the Switch 2. So yeah, this would be awesome. And then it's like, if this is true and they're working on this, a question I've asked a million times. Whoa, when would they show this off? If I had to guess, probably a Nintendo Direct. Probably the thing that we're all waiting for. Nintendo, come on, please. Please. Let me get something, please. But ladies and gentlemen, what do you think about this? Because your opinion matters most. So in the comments below, I would love to hear from you guys. Truly, we talked about a lot today, so let me know what you guys are thinking. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video, if you could do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe on the way out. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter on the way out, and consider becoming a channel member because that would be amazing. We have 13 channel members. I would love to get to 15. And you guys know me. I'll see you very soon with a new video. Peace.